Hello and welcome to the Life in the Fasting Lane podcast. Every single week, we are here to educate you, challenge you, and encourage you along your journey with intermittent fasting and finding the right way of eating for you. Check us out at fastinglane.com and on Twitter and Instagram at fastinglane. Today, I'm sorry for you if you're not watching the video because the dude's got arms for days. Our guest this week is Dr. Shawn Baker, doctor, world record holding athlete, and advocate for the carnivore diet. Shawn, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, the beautiful Ms. E, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to get to interact with people since we're all trapped at home and trying to wait out this craziness. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Shawn, thanks so much. I'll tell you guys a little bit about Shawn. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He's an international speaker. He wrote a book called The Carnivore Diet, and he is the CEO of MeatRx.com. I also follow Shawn on Twitter, and I think it's S Baker MD. Is that right?
That is. The S and the B are capitalized and the MD is capitalized. Because it's kind of funny with Twitter, it's all case sensitive. And so
okay. So you guys got to
check
check him out there. He often posts really good information about the carnivore diet. And also, if you're like me, who happens to like looking at good looking men, he also posts some pictures that I enjoy. So I am all about that, Shawn. But before we get started with you, I want to talk a little bit that Life in the Fasting Lane, this podcast, is mostly focused on intermittent fasting, extended fasting, all the things that entails. But we also talk about low carb. And I've had a lot of different people on the show. I've had one doctor, JD, who was really brilliant. And because of religious reasons, and he's in, because of beliefs in his country in India, focuses on keto for vegetarian. I've had people that Maria Emmerich and ketogenic girl who definitely lean more carnivore. And so I just want to start this off by saying, I always want to talk to different types of people because I think the way to figuring out what you want to do for your food choices is up to you. No doctor's going to get inside your body. No person's going to understand what it feels like inside your brain. And so I want you to hear from different people from all different walks of life. And today you're lucky enough to hear from a doctor who believes that this certain way of eating is something to examine. So, Shawn, we're going to get started off right away. Could you start off by telling me, first of all, what your diet looks like? Like, what'd you eat today?
Well, strangely enough, I haven't eaten it today. So I'm going to have a first meal. But, it's right after this, I'm going to eat 5 pieces of fish.
What kind of fish?
It's going to be a tilapia right now. I'm currently playing with some leaner cuts of meat right now, and then later this evening I'll probably have some kind of steak, and I'm not sure, maybe throw some shrimp in there. I mean, my diet, is generally, it's always been carnivorous for the last 3 years, but I vary a little bit depending on what goals are. Right now, because I'm trying to get a little leaner for a different type of sport, I'm going to do. I'm a little heavy, so I'm trying to get from 240 down to about 225. So I'm doing it with leaner cuts of meat. But yeah, I'm generally about twice a day, maybe once a day. I might even throw in some something to make you happy, some intermittent fasting, some maybe a day or 2 fasts in there, just to experiment a little bit more, just because I've been doing the same thing for about 3 years. But I am a protein advocate guy. I definitely think protein is essential. I think we under eat it generally for most people, and then I think fat, in the sense of a ketogenic diet is still very important. I mean, we do need fat. Fat is something we need in the diet. It's just finding the right amount, I think, is important to do. And I think even in the context of a carnivorous diet, you can overeat. And I know this is heretical because most people find that meat to be very satiating. It's hard to overeat. And many people, there's also some metabolic advantages to protein. That even people that are strict calories in, calories out, people will say that, because of the difficulty in metabolizing protein and the excess cost and energy, that it kind of gives you that little bit of an edge. And so I think protein, for the most part, tends to be a friendly macronutrient, particularly in an overall package there. So that's what I'm doing today. It may change in a month, but that's yesterday I had a couple sirloin steaks. I had some more fish. I can't remember if I had any. I cooked fish and some ghee, and so getting some fat that way.
So you said you hadn't eaten yet. What time is it there?
It is 11. So I'll probably after this. So it'll be probably noonish when I start cooking. I had my dinner last night around 4 p.m. So what is that? It's, I don't know how many hours that is. So 4 to 6, 19 hours of fasting, I guess. So, and I think that's real, what most people call this the physiologic fast. It's kind of one of those, I'm not intentionally sort of saying I can't eat until this time. It's just, that's when I'm kind of hungry right now because of the training. I've done 2 workouts this morning already. I've rode 4,000 meters and sets of 2,000 meters and a bunch of push-ups in between. And like I said, I'm on this sort of shift right now. This isn't my normal routine, but because I'm just kind of making this aggressive shift to get leaner and drop about, 10, 15 pounds of body weight. Hopefully most of it will be fat. I'll preserve most of that muscle. I'm kind of, and I'm stuck at home. It's kind of like, there's adaptive behaviors and maladaptive behaviors. And some people sit at home and eat Twinkies and watch Netflix. Other people, do other things. And, I'm doing that right now.
So Shawn, thank you for bringing that up. I want to talk about that a little bit. I struggled from a lifetime of obesity and only got to feeling better the past couple of years after discovering Dr. Jason Fung and Megan Ramos and intermittent fasting. And before that, 24 years of obesity, every diet, 3 bariatric surgeries, tried everything, couldn't do it. And so it's always interesting to me when you're like, it's not really fasting. I'm not saying I can't eat over here. I just do that because I'm not hungry. I had never, before I did low carb and intermittent fasting, ever experienced a moment where I was not hungry. And every moment of every day was about hunger. Right now, while a lot of us are self-isolating or some people are quarantined and people are stressed, I want to talk about that mental shift it takes because I see so many people going to the store and buying muffins and pre-baked goods and noodles and things that are easy. And I understand money limitations, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we have a choice. As a doctor, let me ask you this question. Why does it seem so much damn more comforting to eat a big chocolate cake than it does to eat a steak? Like, nothing about my mind is like, I'm going to be comforted. I mean, it is a little bit now because I've been doing this a few years. But at first, that shift in my brain just tells me I'm going to feel comforted if I eat some cake. And I'm not going to feel comforted if I eat a sirloin. Why? Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think, when a sirloin is pretty lean, so you're going to have less caloric intake. But I mean, I think what happens is, we are physiologically made to seek energy. I mean, we need it. I mean, that's part of what keeps us going. And so when we become adapted from birth, basically, I mean, if you're, I don't know what your family history is or anyone's family, but, a lot of times we see obesity that kind of gets, now it's getting passed down to generation. I think it's not necessarily it's not a genetic thing. I think it's a physiologic thing. I think when the babies are born in a state of high glucose exposure, hyperinsulinemic, and then we start them on, either, breast milk is still high in lactose. There's still a lot of sugar in there. And then we immediately shift into rice cereals and fruit juices and fruit chews. And I mean, that's where you start. I mean, that is where life starts for most people. No, in today's society, in Western society, it's convenience food, and that's what is produced. That's what's there. That's what's available. It's not going away. I mean, it's cheap. It's profitable. And so we've got this. We need energy. Boom, we fill it with glucose. I mean, I'm saying that in a general term, but I mean, it's a carbohydrate-based food. It's a cake. Because we know it's going to fill that temporary metabolic need, that metabolic crisis. And we're not particularly metabolically flexible. And that's where we can access fat. We can go 12 hours without eating. We can go a day without eating. I mean, my goodness. I mean, we should all be able to go a day or two without eating and not freak out. I mean, that should be the normal state of affairs. I mean, I can certainly do it without even, without thinking about it. If I'm like, I can't eat tomorrow, no big deal. But for a lot of people, it's a huge, huge deal. And I think it's because we just, our metabolism is so used to running on glucose that's why that's comforting. And I mean, I think there's some other brain receptors that are stimulated that, also give you this almost a drug-like effect. And it's the same reason we see that people that do these sort of really sugar-restricted, carbohydrate-restricted diets, particularly things like carnivore diets, where they're actually able to find their physiologic desires for nicotine, alcohol, illicit drugs really wane. I think because you're kind of tripping that, that same set of neural pathways, and feeding this sort of addiction. We see the rats that will hit the machine so they can get sugar quicker than they'll hit it for heroin.
Yeah.
So I think it's clearly there's some addiction behavior that goes in on this. Clearly there's that physiology and that lack of metabolic flexibility for most people. You know, it's like, it's not that sugar or anything is going to taste bad to me at any point. I mean, you've got those sweet taste receptors, and I think, you know, the problem is access. We now have constant access to sweet, whereas before, you know, theoretically, and again, we don't have a time machine, but theoretically we could go back in time, and the ability to run into something sweet was probably not that frequent for most of our evolutionary past. You know, some berries when they're ripe, when we can compete with the birds and the bugs and the other animals for it, and then maybe some honey occasionally, which, you know, you got to fight bees for. And so it's not like we had access to salt all the time, and now we do. Now it's everywhere. It's in everything. It's in all of our food, and it is a tough environment.
You know, Shawn, I look at you and you're jacked. And every time I see somebody like this, I think they've always been fit. They've always been healthy. I can never accomplish what they are doing because it's easier for them. It's a judgment. I understand that it's wrong, but I want you to know what goes inside my head. Whereas I come from, I was 300 pounds, and man, at 185 pounds now, I'm like petite in my brain. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm killing it. So have you ever been overweight? Did you ever struggle with food? Did you ever, or have you always been an athlete?
I've always been an athlete. I've been 305 pounds as an athlete. And I was, you know, I mean, in retrospect, looking back at what I was back then, I didn't know it or think it at the time, but I was probably way too darn fat. I mean, I wasn't, you know, no one would look at me and say, well, that's a really obese guy, but I was
Yeah.
I was a big man. I'm 6'5". I was 300 pounds, 305 pounds, powerlifting. I was strong. You know, I was deadlifting almost 800 pounds. I was a world champion Highland Games guy, throwing big, huge telephone poles, competing against guys who were, by the way, 6'9", 350 pounds. So I was one of the little big guys back then.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was about, I don't know, 42, 43, where that sort of caught up to me, where I didn't really, I mean, I was running sprints. I was performing well as an athlete. I could jump onto a 4-foot box at 280 pounds. I mean, I was even in my 40s, I mean, I was a very, very powerful, explosive athlete, but at the same time, I was developing metabolic syndrome. I was developing most likely prediabetes. Had sleep apnea. My blood pressure was going up. I literally was eating myself, even though I was training, you know, like a world-class athlete, which I was. I mean, I was competing as a world-class athlete, but, you know, that all took a change when I was about 43-ish, you know, went through a divorce, started reevaluating things, said, okay, I got to change nutrition. And I went this entire nutritional journey, and it's kind of led me to this carnivore. And even today, like we talked about, I am still changing things a little bit to where I'm, you know, trying to get, even better, even healthier, even at 53 where I am now. And yeah, I think food is something that I've struggled with. I didn't struggle to eat it. I ate a lot of it, you know. And I notoriously have eaten, you know, lots and lots of food. But I mean, it's still an evolution in process. I'm still learning and still improving my overall health. I mean, you look at me on the outside and say, well, you look pretty healthy and strong, but there are still things I'm working on to get better. And I don't, you know, it's not like I just woke up one day and ate steak and suddenly I had muscle. I mean, I've been training. I've been lifting weights for 40 years. I mean, literally for 40 years. And that's just part of who I am, who I'm wired to be. But I think, to your point, I mean, going from 300 to 185 is tremendous. And I know you're not done yet. I mean, I know you're continuing to
Nah. I'm going to keep getting
improve.
hotter, Shawn. Why
There you
not?
go. Yeah, no, why not? I mean, you know, just get stronger, get fitter. I mean, I'm obviously a proponent of strength and lean muscle mass. I think that's important for health. And I think there's, you know, certain dietary strategies that lend itself better to that. I think, you know, certainly managing energy is important, and how we do that is still, like I said, I think there are advantages to not eating garbage, and I think there's hormonal advantages, but I do think that energy still has a role here. And I think there's, you know, there's nuance and there's subtlety, and there's not, you know, if you just eat all the meat you can possibly eat, you're never going to. Some people that does work for, but not everybody. And to be honest, I'm one of those it doesn't work for necessarily. So it's one of those things that you find as you live. You know, like you said, the point you made about the doctor and the people telling you get one body to live in, you got to live in it, no one else. And so you got to be the one that makes that decision on how to best utilize that and how to feel best and perform best.
Well, I think you're a pretty interesting doctor when you say things like people have to find their own way. They can take their advice to their doctor, they can listen, and they have to find their own way. I went to doctors for many years and tried the things they said. And I know a lot of people say poor things about doctors. And honestly, I think they were doing the best they could with the information they had and trying to help. It just wasn't the right information for me. And when you just casually mentioned, like, it's no big deal to not eat for a day or two. Like, I really didn't know that. I truly didn't. I am from South Louisiana. We don't skip meals ever. We eat all day long, every moment of the day, for a funeral, for a birth, for a birthday, for a holiday. It doesn't matter. And I really, even as a college educated woman, thought if I didn't eat for 5 days, I would die. Like, I really just had these ideas in my head that I did not, just were incorrect. So I know one of the things right now that people are concerned about, they're at home, and I think it sounds like you'll agree with me that, everybody has their own way of eating, but I don't think anybody's out there that's saying that eating a whole bunch of sugar is going to super help your immune system. So I would just say, what would be your advice to people? They're at home now, they have a certain amount of food, or they're getting the last of the food that they might have and be at home for a few weeks. Would you make any suggestions on not particularly what they eat, but like maybe the most important thing to avoid, and how they could just do one thing as far as timing of when they ate that might help them a little bit?
Well, I mean, this is sort of a delicate subject because people get upset when you say eating a certain way is going to make you perhaps less resistant to disease. But I mean, that's clearly the case. I mean, and this isn't something that you can eat one meal tomorrow and suddenly you're
Yeah.
immune from infectious disease. But I mean, if we look at this, and I think this is a good time to reflect upon, lifestyle and diet in general. I mean, these sort of pandemics, these viral infections are going to increase. I mean, this is what's going to happen. And the reason for this is as our population increases, as we see increases in population density, that's why we see so much of this in China coming out, H1N1, swine flu, bird flu, all these things come out of China because when we look at the metropolitan areas in China, they have 20 million people. Hong Kong has 35, or Tokyo has 35 million people. Beijing, all these huge 20 million, 25 million plus metropolitan areas where these people are just packed on in each other. So it doesn't matter where the virus, what its original source is, it's going to spread through populations. And we see this in New York and London and Paris and Los Angeles and so on and so forth. And so we're going to see these continue to go. And so we need to be in a position we either change that and we have zoning laws where we say population density can only be X amount. I don't care what you real estate developers think. We're not going to build high rise after high rise after high rise. Or we, talk about, well, let's not have a population that is inundated with chronic disease. And this is what happens to our hospital systems. Our hospital systems are overrun with people with most often acute exacerbations of chronic disease, diabetic complications, obesity complications, COPD complications, whatever, you name it, dialysis, kidney failure, things which are often related to metabolic disease. So we've got a hospital system and doctors that are worn out. They're tired. They're pushed to the edge. I mean, the whole system's not doing well in general. Hospital system's sick. And then you throw a pandemic on top of this, and now we've got economic craziness. Shut everything down. Because we can't cope. We don't know if the hospital systems can take a big influx of people, which they can't. Right. So the thought is, what am I going to eat? How am I going to be healthy so I don't have these chronic diseases? And we know that diabetics, we need old people are at particularly high risk for this particular infection, it would seem. And again, I don't want to put too much because we don't know a lot about it. We're still learning quite a bit. And so, but people with high blood sugar, well, eating a bunch of sugar is not going to help your blood sugar. I don't care. There's no, I don't think there's anybody out there saying that eating all this processed just stuff that when I went to the grocery store to stock up on some meat and eggs and stuff like that, I mean, I saw cart after cart of, muffins and potato chips. And I mean, I was just looking at this, gosh, I mean, this is not the right answer. So
Yes.
first of all, eating, whether you follow a carnivore diet or a vegetarian diet or a whole food diet, that's probably in general, a better strategy for immune system. Again, if we're eating constantly and we're snacking constantly, like so many of us have been trained to do. You remember when I was a kid, probably, I don't know how old you are, but when I was a kid, I mean, there was, don't snack, you'll ruin your appetite for dinner. That
Yeah.
has gone away now. We don't do that. The kid says he's hungry, here's a fruit stick. Here's a little mini muffin. Here's a healthy quote unquote granola bar. And so what we see is this persistently elevated glucose, persistently stimulated insulin, pancreas. That probably is a less advantageous thing for infectious disease. I mean, that, again, I think there's data to support that. There's data out there looking at things like certain compounds in certain foods, and obviously my bias is towards meat. So I look at things like carnosine, where there's been a number of studies looking at carnosine, which is exclusive to animal products. It sort of mitigates the effects of things like influenza, Zika virus, and some of these other things. So we know that there are immune boosting effects of food. You can argue about what the best diet is or not, but I mean, clearly, I don't think Twinkies have an immune boosting effect. And so I would just say that. I think, like I said, I think, and as someone who fasts, there are certain people where fasting is not the best answer right away. If you're malnourished, if you're nursing, if you're pregnant, if you're a small child, if you're, and fasting doesn't mean I skipped a meal. I mean, we know, that's not, oh, I didn't have lunch. It doesn't mean, oh my gosh, you're going to die. But I mean, if you start getting into this 2-3 day stuff, and then we're like, okay, maybe certain people have a lot of medical issues, may not want to do that. But I mean, at the same time, you probably don't need to be constantly snacking. And what you need to eat needs to be nourishing foods, not just garbage.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. One of the main things I've been doing during the past couple of weeks is asking smart people like you their opinions on this. And I know that we want to listen to doctors and professors and researchers, and we wish that everybody just had the answer and would say, eat this way and it's going to magically protect you. And that answer does not exist. We don't know. If we knew that, we would have already solved it. But here is what I'm hearing from you and Dr. Jason Fung and David Sinclair, who is a Harvard professor. Try not to eat a bunch of sugar and eat less often. That's it. That is like the big general immune boosting stuff that I'm hearing across the board that most doctors, I think, can agree on. And I feel stressed that most of the food I see online or in people's carts or whatever is lots of sugar. And man, I get it. I think all of us are worried about each other, about ourselves, and we want comfort. And I just wanted to bring up that I think right now, just you got those things, that's awesome. Push them to the back a little bit. Start with the other stuff first. Instead of eating all day long because it's your first time being at home with your kids. And as much as we love our kids, here they are at home while we're working, or our spouse or our roommate, and they're driving us crazy. It's really easy to just go ahead and eat some Doritos to deal with that frustration, because we're all supposed to be so grateful that we're home with the people we love, and we are. But that stress of being scared in the situation, I don't know about y'all, doesn't always make me the nicest human. And I have to find some way to calm down. And that way for me has been, first week, I did exactly that. I ate things I don't normally eat, and I felt like crap. Like I just felt like crap. And when I eat things I don't normally eat anymore, I eventually get sick, and I just can't do that right now. I have to be as good as I can to have my best chance of not getting sick. So thank you for sharing your advice on that. I know another thing that a lot of people have asked about is vitamins right now, or I hear a lot of different advice, but like my impression is it's great if you take a vitamin, that's wonderful. And it's important to examine, but in the current situation, I don't think there's any magic vitamin that somebody has come out and said, this is going to protect you, from viruses and diseases in the next couple of days. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to take a vitamin to save yourself from this stuff. And I think, again, it's hopefully, people will use this to catalyze an improvement in their overall health. I think in general, when we look at supplements, for the most part, they tend to be not very efficacious. Certain, vitamins and antioxidants have even been shown to be deleterious in supplement form. So, I mean, you're better off getting
Shawn,
your
Shawn, that was a giant word. I don't know what that means. Deleterious?
hurts you.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you for taking it down for me.
Sorry. So yeah. I mean, there's studies, that have been done looking at antioxidant supplementation. It actually shows it net harm to people. And so, That is something you just have to realize. Again, I'm really a big food first type of person, and I think supplement with exercise. My goodness, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much other benefits from that, and it doesn't have to be go and row 2,000 meters on a rowing machine or deadlift 500 pounds like something I might do. But I mean, just do a little bit of stuff. You can get in your kitchen and do some squats. You can walk around. You can take your kids out for a walk outside. It's free. Hopefully, if you're in Louisiana, you got some sunshine. I mean, these things are, instead of sitting on the couch with your kids and everybody's, going back passing a bag of potato chips, take the kids outside. You can social isolate, and be outside with your dogs, with your kids. You can walk around the block. You can make it a game. You can see, I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. If your kids want to have energy and they run, you tell them run to the next stop sign and you can time them or something like that. You just,
Yes.
you just kind of make it fun, and you just kind of get them away from the sedentary behavior. We as a species are not meant to be cooped up in a little inside area, and not doing stuff. We're meant to be out and moving. And as you felt going from 300 to 185, your body was capable of more, and you probably felt like, hey, you should celebrate. And when we say exercise, people think walking on the treadmill or lifting. It doesn't have to be that. It could be just playing. I mean, play. I mean, celebrate what your body is now capable of, and get there. And you just do a little bit more each day. And you don't have to be this crazy nutto competitive guy like I have, which is kind of a mental illness. But I mean, but I think you can do those things, and I mean, make it make it an enjoyable part of your day. You'll be surprised at, you and I know this guy, Stan Efferding, who's a friend of mine, who's a big bodybuilder guy, but he's a big advocate of something like 10-minute walk, and just a couple times a day, just stroll. If you got a dog, that's a perfect excuse. Your dogs are going to be happier. But, after a meal in particular, instead of, stuffing yourself in front of the TV or eating and then go sit down and watch TV, eat your meal and then go for a walk. Go for a walk around the block, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you'll be surprised how much better you feel just from a mental health standpoint, and you'll help your physiology out too.
Thank you, Shawn. I feel like everybody who's trapped inside or staying inside to help others right now, just know we got both sides of the spectrum here. We got Shawn, who is this world-class athlete, and he's rowing 2,000 meters, which I don't even know how long that is, but it sounds really long. And I got up this morning, and after a month of working out in the garage with my new weight set, I was able to do an overhead press with the barbell. And I just thought I was a badass, Shawn. I was like, look at this. So my husband and I go in the garage and we work out, and he was an athlete when he was younger. He's always in great shape. So I like to watch him work out because he's super hot. So that's fun. And then the dog is just living her best life, getting 4 to 6 walks a day instead of 2. Our daughter goes and does that. And we're going to probably do recently we did a Jane Fonda workout from YouTube in the living room as a family. And my daughter was like, what are these things on their legs? She had never seen leg warmers. So this is also an educational period, right? We can open up people to all kind of new things like leg warmers. So basically, if you're in the house, move your body in whatever way feels good to you, maybe just a little more than usual, because I think one of the quickest benefits, and Shawn, I want to hear your input on this. Yes, it keeps your body healthy, but I think there's so much stress we're dealing with right now and so much unsuredness that for me, the moving and the weightlifting, as little as it is for me, it makes me feel sane, at least for like a day.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The mental health benefits to exercise are enormous. I mean, there's study after study after study that shows that. And so even if you don't feel that, you can outrun a bad diet, which there's a lot of evidence that it's difficult. I mean, I tried for years and eventually failed, but yeah, exercise, moving, getting out, sunshine, all of these things do have a objective and clearly significant benefit. So, I mean, I think you should take advantage of this time to, if you're not working or, you've got time to reflect. I mean, you can, like I said, you can do the Netflix thing and, sit on the couch, or you can really, take stock and say, hey, what do I want to do to not only protect myself from disease, and not just infectious disease, chronic disease, which is honestly going to be more. I mean, even though everybody's, they're heightened sense and worried about the coronavirus. I mean, the odds of that affecting you is very, very low. I mean, but the odds of you getting heart disease, the odds of you getting diabetes, cancer, I mean, it's like, 1 in 3, 1 in 2. Whereas coronavirus is going to be 1 in 1 million. So, I mean, it's, from a long lasting positive impact. So, I mean, this is where you need to make those changes. And then, hopefully we all, and this is a sad thing I see. And this is one of the reasons I started MeatRx, was because I want to make a huge difference in what we have on a population basis. And I mean, we literally, with the amount of wealth and resource and brain power we have in the United States, and we have a populace that is, diseased, sick, disabled, depressed. We should not have that. We should be strong, robust, healthy, happy people. I mean, I think that's clearly achievable if we work with the priorities there, instead of trying to get the next neatest electronic gadget, virtual reality. We should work on real reality, and focus on people's health. And the thing I talk about with nutrition, I talk about it in the book, and I talk about it in just everything I say. I think, when we have this sort of belief that I'm going to tell you how to eat so you can live to be 90 or 100 or 80, and how you can not have heart disease, we just don't have that information. That data will never be there. And so why don't we just refocus our goals and say, we've got all these people that are obese or sick, and let's change the way they do it. If they have to do it through fasting, if they have to do it through a meat-based diet, if they have to do it through a vegetarian diet, I don't care how we get there, but we got to get there. And the answer is not more drugs. It's not more pills. It's not more gastric bypasses. It's not more, stomach balloons. It's not more drugs that make you pee off glucose. I mean, that's not the right way to do it. I mean, the right way to do it is, go after lifestyle, go after food. Our food system, these guys are out to make money. They're businesses. They don't care one way or another if you or me, or you sitting in Louisiana or me sitting in California is healthy. They just care about how much merchandise can we move, and that's the bottom line. And that's reality. So that's not going away. But we have to, as a community, kind of grassroots, and that's what you're doing, and what I'm doing, and all of us are doing, is kind of saying, what is our reach? How many people can we affect? How many people are going to listen to this podcast? 10, 100, 500? How many of them are going to, actually take action based on this? And hopefully some. And that's all we can do.
Thanks, Shawn. I wrote a book called Life in the Fasting Lane with Dr. Jason Fung and Megan Ramos. It's about to come out. And I felt like I really, being a non-doctor, non-researcher, wanted to talk to people in that way, that it's like, it's about your choice, and nobody can figure this out for you. They can give you information. You can talk to the smartest people in the world, but you have to make that choice. You have to figure it out. It's really nice to hear that from a doctor. So let's talk about MeatRx. What is MeatRx.com? And then one of the questions I have is, I love beef. I love meat. And I usually try to buy grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And it's more expensive. And I think I know the answer to this, but does it really make a difference in your opinion?
Well, I'll answer the second question first, and I'll talk about MeatRx. So, the grass-finished, grain-finished question I get quite a bit in observing people. And this is all we can really do, because the studies out there have been very few at this point, and very unequivocal, or very equivocal, I should say. It doesn't really show one having a significant benefit over the other. I would say for the vast majority of the people, buying what they can afford has the same effect. That is to say, people that eat grain-finished beef, in the supermarket, get just as much mitigation of disease, diabetes, weight loss as people that are spending extra money. Now, having said that, there are individuals that definitely say they feel better when they only eat grass-finished meat. And there are a few that say they feel better eating grain-finished meat. And it may have to do with the fat content and some of these things. And I know there's concerns about antibiotics and hormones and pesticide residues. Those things are really, really small effect. In fact, if we look at antibiotics, by law, technically, there's not supposed to be any antibiotics in the meat, whether occasionally some gets through. About 0.5% of the meat that's tested annually, regularly by USDA, shows that there is a residual amount of antibiotic in there. So that's a very small amount. So it's kind of like 99.5% of the time, there's going to be no antibiotic in any meat you eat. Hormone production amounts, if you look at an animal that's been fed hormones versus an animal that's not, they still make hormones. A cow, just like you have hormones, I have hormones. When you cut my meat open, I'm going to have hormones in it. So the difference is in like a couple nanograms per 3 ounces or 100 grams. So it's really, we're talking minuscule nanograms amount. And so like I said, if you're worried about the hormones in beef, then you wouldn't eat eggs or dairy because it has, 10 times as much hormones as you will
Okay.
even in a implanted steer. So, the pesticide levels, again, the numbers that we see are infinitesimally small. That, I mean, it's like the effect is, are you getting the same amount by eating any other food? Plant food, for instance, you're going to have more probably than you're going to have with beef, and I think that's not a big issue. Now, having said that, I don't discount the fact that some people say they feel better on this, and that's fine. And then I guess when we look at the overall big picture, I think we should sort of push more towards a regenerative style pasturing of animals where it can be done. I think supporting those guys, supporting ranchers directly is huge because the meat companies, there's four major companies in the United States: Cargill, Tyson Foods, JBS, and Marfrig. The last two are Brazilian companies. They provide something like 80% of our beef. And so these guys don't really necessarily have our best interest at heart. In my view, I think they're going to start pushing alternative forms of beef. They're going to put in the fake foods, the fake meat, the chemical stuff, because they'll make more profit of that, just like any other company. And so I think
Sure.
direct to rancher, direct to consumer, and I do a lot of that as much as I'm able to, and I support that stuff. Now, what MeatRx is, like I said, I think the healthcare system is sick. I think the healthcare system, in many cases, has devolved into a disease management industry, and we do a lot of disease management. We kind of just foster disease and we treat it. We don't really give people a hope for cure. And I think things like hypertension and diabetes and obesity, I think those are all completely curable and reversible diseases. Type 2 particular, when we're talking about
Yeah.
diabetes. And so I think we should be doing that. I don't think, but I mean, it's not to say that if I get coronavirus or if I'm in an accident, we shouldn't have that system in place, because it does a wonderful job. We're the best in the world at that. And as a physician, I know most physicians care deeply for their patients. They do the best they can. The problem is we're not trained. We don't have the tools to deal with chronic disease effectively. And this is what MeatRx is. And so where we have disease management over there with regard to chronic disease, I think we need a different alternative route. And I like to call it health creation. And so I think, when we have Donald Trump versus Joe Biden or whoever is competing for presidential spot, arguing about how we're going to pay for access to health care, it's really, what are you giving people access to? Is it just more pills and prescriptions and procedures and high-tech disease mitigation, which really is a losing game in the long haul? It's kind of like, hey, the Titanic is sinking and we're arguing about how to pay for arranging the deck chairs. And my vote is we need to get on a different boat and we need to come on this health creation thing. And this was MeatRx is. And so what it is one, it's a community, because as you probably know, as an addict, a recovering addict from sugar and carbohydrates and food addictions, you need support. And I don't care how much
Yeah.
information you have. The information is already out there. We've been putting labels on food, telling people to calorie restrict. We know all kinds of stuff about the things in food. We know that eating a bunch of cake is not good for us, and yet we still do it, right? It's not like the knowledge is not there. And so you need something. You need something in your advantage physiologically. I think a meat-based diet helps with that. You need something in your corner accountability support wise. And so we've had this huge support community that we're growing. We have resources, information, knowledge. We have physicians portals. We have coaching, which is just extremely affordable. I want, my goal is to make this affordable. So we're like $18 for 30 minutes of coaching. I mean, it's like very, very affordable. And it's just fostering this community. I do a session every single day, 9 a.m. Pacific. I'm there every day talking to people. We get 50, 100 people show up. We answer
Wow.
questions. We ask questions. We support each other. We're gonna step out and we're gonna grow into some other areas, because I understand that a meat-only diet is very sort of niche, although
Yeah.
very effective for a lot of people. It's very effective for autoimmune, for gut issues in particular. It can be effective for metabolic diseases, like any other low-carb ketogenic diet can be. I think it has some advantages with some other aspects with protein and stuff like that and bioavailability. But so we are, going to aggressively, go into the market with this health creation idea, and not stick with dogma. We're not like the only way. This is the only way. We're learning as we go. Like I said, my journey, I've learned. People in the space are learning. We'll probably incorporate some component of fasting in there, because I think there is some efficacy for many people. As you know, I think there's other dietary strategies. I don't think we'll be a vegan platform anytime soon, but I do think there is some room for growth. And I think that what we're really seeing really nicely, as opposed to like the other social media groups, Facebook and, Instagram, Twitter, is the interaction level is so much better. The support level is better. The video interface is better. I think people really enjoy that community aspect of that, to be able to like do what we're doing, but now we've got 50 people or 20 people or 10 or whatever, to have these things freely available at all times throughout the world, and
Yeah.
specialty support groups. That's going to be really, really helpful. And I think that we're going to see market-driven people that are just like, hey, I'm tired of going to the doctor and getting another pill. It's not that doctors are bad necessarily, but like I said, when you graduate from medical school and then subsequently your subspecialty residency, you get certain tools put in your toolbox. And fasting, diet, lifestyle, exercise, they're not there. They're not in that toolbox. And so when you're like trying to tell, now it's not to say that some doctors, myself included, don't have a lot of knowledge about diet and exercise and nutrition, because I do, just because I've done it on my own for my whole life. But the average doctor, you walk in there and, we always see it all the time. There's a doctor, you look at him and, man, you don't look all that healthy yourself. They don't necessarily, it's not to say they can't have the knowledge, but a lot of times they don't. And so I don't recommend you go to the doctor for fitness advice, nutrition advice, or even sometimes I hate to put this, but health advice. We're disease managers, disease mitigators. And sometimes the health advice that you may have gotten, gastric bypass, maybe you might not have had to have that, if you discovered, some of these other lifestyle issues first.
Yeah, I definitely think I would have made different choices had I been introduced to the knowledge I was finally introduced to. And Shawn, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really impressed by what you've done and what you talk about, but even more about your openness and honesty about not having everything figured out and still exploring, and everybody needing to explore, to find their own way. I hope you will come back on, because I still have more questions for you, and I think you're really cool. But guys, you need to check Shawn out at MeatRx.com, and also on Twitter at capital S, capital B, that's SB Baker, capital M, capital D. And what other places can people check you out, Shawn?
So I've got Instagram, which is probably where I spend most of my time on Instagram. So it's Shawn Baker 1967. So that's there. And then I do a YouTube video almost every day. So I do a little YouTube video. So Shawn Baker YouTube, you can say Shawn Baker Carnivore or something, you'll find my channel there. So I'm pretty active on social media. I am, I do a little bit of consulting still. I'm just kind of I'm trying to keep 2 hours a day available for that, for people that want to do direct consultations. But I'm doing so much. I'm trying to do so much stuff behind the scenes that time is dwindling for me, which is honestly a good thing, because if I can reach tens of thousands and hopefully millions of people, then I'll be happy. That means I'm successful. And what we're all doing as a community, what you're doing, what I'm doing, is just so incredibly important. And I will be happy to come back on, maybe down the road. I'm gonna do some personal experimentation, maybe with some fasting, and maybe we can talk about that type of stuff.
Well, good. I'm going to send you my book then.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to read it. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Shawn, thank you so much for being here, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to Life in the Fasting Lane podcast. And get all the tips you need on fasting, low carb, how to eat, things to explore at fastinglane.com. You can check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Fasting Lane. And until next time, to your health and hotness.